Hello, NextGen Nation, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the afternoon keynote. I'm Doug Mash-Curry, Vice President, General Manager of GovLoop, and I have the privilege of being today's moderator for this session, How to Embrace Conflict for Effective Problem Solving. Just like a flight attendant says, if this is the session you're supposed to be in, welcome. If you're supposed to be in a different session, now's the time to switch, but I hope you stay with us. We've had a great morning and afternoon. Those afternoon keynotes were great. We had so many different takeaways. We learned how you can get your work done and still be innovative, followed by success strategies for a rewarding career in public service through the pursuit of passionate purpose. A wonderful keynote. And the other one was about how to relearn to learn with 7 essential life skills. That's a mouthful, but it was really good. And these will all be available on demand if you missed them. But let's move on to today's topic. We have a rock star speaker, and I'm really excited to jump into this. And we're going to talk about how to embrace conflict to effectively solve problems. So, in your workplace, are you nervous about an important conversation that's coming up or a critical conversation? Maybe there's someone you don't get along with, someone with the proverbial difficult personality, or maybe you have to just convey a difficult message on behalf of your agency. Figuring out how to do that and do it effectively in a safe, equitable, and constructive way is paramount. In today's session, our speaker is going to talk about the communication skills needed to deliver that, how you can resolve conflicts, how you can feel like you have the right tools to have those difficult conversations rather than avoid them. We know when we avoid things, nothing gets done, and it just gets harder and harder, so we wanted to get away from that. Before we do that, you've probably been here. I got to go through housekeeping items. Otherwise, Emily, our director, will get rid of you. So let's talk about it. If you are using Twitter, please share what you're learning using the hashtag NextGenGov. Speaking of the console, we have some great resources available to you to download, including this slide deck on the right-hand side of your console. So check those resources out. I hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, please put a statement or a question or a Q&A tab, and my colleague Casey will help you with your technical difficulties. We also have an attendee chat, so if you want to participate in that, click on the blue group chat button in the middle panel of your screen, and you can interact with other attendees. If you have questions, once again, please put them in the Q&A tab. Lastly, we will email you a link to the entire event tomorrow, which will be sent out directly to your inbox. We have CPEs available. There's 3 ways to earn your CPEs. 1, you're going to do this now. You're going to attend this live online training for the full duration. 2, take the polls. There'll be 3 polls spread out through today's presentation. When you take the polls, you will see the question, you'll see the responses. Click your response and hit submit. And then lastly, complete the evaluation form. This evaluation form will be found in the resource module, and it will also be emailed to you tomorrow. So if you need CPEs, this is a great way to do it. All right, let's get to the main attraction here. We have Ruben Perez, who's the faculty member of the Federal Executive Institute Center for Leadership Development, OPM. He's coming to us from Charlottesville, Virginia today, his first trip post-COVID, I think, first business trip. And I really appreciate his time coming out and talking to us and getting us smarter. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Ruben. Welcome.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. And hello and welcome to everybody joining me for this 1-hour conversation on conflict and embracing conflict. I say conversation, I have to remind myself, I'm used to doing educational programs where it's a talk with and we get to go back and forth. But I know in this case, I'm going to be doing more of a talk at. So got to remember to change my language there. But I'm excited to spend the day with you. As Doug said, I'm on my first official business trip since the pre-COVID era. And when I agreed and said yes to this opportunity, I didn't know I'd be traveling to Charlottesville. So I am hopeful. We did the check. The Wi-Fi seems to be strong. I'm hopeful that continues to be the case. If not, sincere apologies. I did go in for the premium Wi-Fi to try and make sure you have the most positive experience as possible as we spend this hour together. The other thing I would offer on that, I do a fair amount of educational workshops on conflict and turning conflict into productive conflict. And looking for ways to do more effective problem solving. And it's a topic I actually very much enjoy. It's not that I enjoy conflict, but I know that there's actually benefit to conflict. which is where my interest first peaked years ago. I was starting to kind of do some research on it and studying it. So that's where we're headed. I offer, there is so much more than what we're going to be able to offer in a 1-hour course of this. So what I plan to do is to give you a couple of approaches that I have found most effective and ways to kind of build your skill set from there. But just emphasizing, it's going to be, I'm going to be covering probably more than I should try to cover in an hour. I'll put that out up front, just because I think it kind of goes in stages. You have to build up to that. But my goal for the day is that you'll walk away with some meaningful thoughts to consider and ponder. So here's kind of where I hope that I plan for us to head today, looking at conflict situations, spending a moment talking about the difference between destructive and constructive conflict, or destructive and constructive behaviors tied to conflict, and then what's a strategy or two in dealing with it. I will put that out there, knowing that any source of conflict really frequently relies on it depends. Right? It depends on the situation. It depends on what's at stake. It depends on who's involved. Quite frankly, it depends on the time of day. If you've had a 12-hour day and you're exhausted and you go home and someone in your world says something short to you that is not fully loaded on short, but you react as if it was the worst thing ever said to you, that's a timing situation on there. So know that in any time we do conversations about conflict and managing conflict and productive conflict, it takes intentionality. It takes focus. It takes an agreement to do it. And that's where people tend to struggle the most, because we kind of think we're going to take this course, we're going to learn something about it, and then it will magically be absorbed and we'll always respond differently. And that, quite frankly, is not the case. But I will say it can be learned. Techniques to improve ways to managing conflict, turning it from a destructive conflict to a more productive conflict, that can be learned. It definitely can happen. It just means right off the get-go, your first takeaway on this is you're going to have to be intentional about it. You're going to have to catch yourself being yourself. You'll hear me saying that a couple of times. It's a phrase I really enjoy in teaching, is we have to catch ourselves being ourselves, meaning that I have to catch myself in the moment of conflict and say, whoa, I'm going back to a pattern I use most often. Maybe it's defensive, maybe it's attack, maybe it's flee, and I need to do it differently. So I have to catch myself being myself and make that change. It's going to move this into a more productive situation than what it has been in the past time of that. And the other part of that, conflict is situational. So while we have a natural tendency to string it along, it doesn't have to be. Each moment of conflict can be and is its own moment of conflict. But oftentimes we harbor it, we store it, we let it build, and then we, again, at the worst opportunity, it shows up and it all comes flooding out. So part of this is also kind of recognizing that kind of pattern that we have of falling back into just storing it until it implodes. We want to handle it in the moment, diffuse it, and move on. So that's partly what we'll talk about. So we're going to go into our first poll of this, and that is, when you think of conflict, what comes to mind? When you think of conflict, what comes to mind? I'm going to switch over to Doug. He's going to handle the poll on this. We would just ask you to go in there and click on. You get to choose one. When it comes to thinking about conflict, what comes to mind? There are no wrong answers, and this is anonymous, so I do not know who's answering with what, so no worries there. But just curious, so when you think of conflict, what comes to mind?
Yeah. So the choices, you have yikes, avoid, disagreement, opportunity, anger, helpful, tension, clarifying, attack. We'll give you about 4 more seconds to answer this. But like I say, it's really it's a tough question. You can only choose one. I could choose many, but we'll go with one. So let's go and see what the results look like here. So tension, definitely the leader in the clubhouse, followed by disagreement and avoid. And Ruben, is that track to kind of what your expectations were, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Usually what you'll see overwhelmingly, and I will admit I set it up, because whenever I've taught this course, I kind of keep a record of what are the first responses people share when asked that question. Overwhelmingly, the experiences are negative, or the comments are negative. Yeah. So tension would be right up there, frequently with disagreement. On there, I will oftentimes see avoid come in a lot more frequently on there. Yeah. And then usually the pattern is we don't see as much of the more positives. We did have some of that, 12% saying with the clarifying, 3.5 saying that it's an opportunity, and that 1%, 1.8 saying it is helpful. So this tracks, Doug, on what we frequently see. Okay. And again, not a surprise. Most of us, I would say most of us have been taught conflict is a bad thing. Maybe we learned it from our families, our parents, our neighbors, our teachers, and how they manage conflict. You know, again, it's a learned behavior. How we learn that is how we tend to show up. And if you rarely have I met people who grew up in an environment where there was always productivity around conflict, right? Where people are like, oh, it's a good thing. We're happy about it. Usually it's a negative. So that's why I think it's such a great topic to have a conversation about.
Great. Well, let's go jump in.
So let's jump in. And these is a definition. There are many definitions about conflict. This is the one that I use on there. It really refers to any situation in which people appear to have some kind of incompatibility, interest. They have a conflict going on with those goals, their principles, or their feelings. This is just a general definition. There are many. As I said, this is one that I tend to use on that part of it, just because it's basically when there are opposing views showing up. So I want to take a moment. I won't spend a lot of time because we do just have the 1 hour, but give you a moment and kind of think through a couple of these. What is an example of a conflict situation that was difficult that you've had to experience? Maybe you're experiencing it right now, that you've had to manage in your work environment. And again, since it's not a talk with, I'm just asking you to kind of mentally frame your thoughts around this conversation for the next hour. And so think about a time of conflict that if you had, maybe it's one that if you had a chance you could go back and do it over, would you? How would you do it differently? Or again, if you're maybe in a work situation right now that is dealing with conflict, and then think about what are the costs and benefits of that conflict? What are the costs and benefits of that conflict? What are some common causes of the conflict amongst individuals and teams? That one we could spend a lot of time with is what are the patterns that you see? What's the common factor? And quite frankly, sometimes it's us and how we show up and how we approach things. We don't like it. We want to kind of go external and let it be other people's faults, but sometimes it is us. I grew up as the youngest child of a lot of kids, and they were, as kids are, rough. And so I learned being defensive at a very young age. Come behind a bunch of boys and girls, I had to learn to defend for myself. And my parents even said, well, you got to toughen up, stand up to them. So I learned one of my patterns of conflict management is to just push through it, trample over it. That's not great in a work environment, right? Like that's something I became aware of at a very young part of my career of like, you can't just kind of like you can your siblings, just push through it and yell at it or whatever. You kind of have to navigate in a very different way. So that's that pattern that I knew showing up, the pattern that was because of the way I was brought up with those kids. And then think about what percentage of your time you spend dealing with conflict. This one might surprise you. It also might not surprise you, but for many of us, we aren't aware of how much of our days and weeks are spent managing conflict or dealing with conflict. I shouldn't say managing, but dealing with, especially for any of you that are supervisors. In my 30 plus years, I've worked in higher education, and now I'm doing government service. But in all of my college, university years, I supervised people, and it felt like every day I was dealing with some element of conflict. Colleagues that didn't get along, students who had situations going on with one another, parents who were angry about the decisions and choices their students were making, their children were making, which was our fault. And I realized that easily about a third of my workday, kind of on average, was dealing with conflict in some capacity. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I don't doubt that you have a lot of that going on as well. So the one thing I want to mention on that, and when we did the survey, when I talked about kind of the positives and the negatives, what is not frequently embraced or even commonly spoken about is there actually are benefits to conflict, which we will cover. but there actually are benefits. And so if you think about it in any kind of developing community, and you can kind of think of your own examples of developing communities, they have found, research has found, that one element that needs to be present in any community is conflict. So there's a Josephson Institute of Ethics, does a lot of work on this. They've done some work going through various cultures around the globe, and have found, regardless of location and regardless of size of community, when asked what were some of the cultural norms or characteristics that needed to be present in order for that culture or that community to thrive and grow, conflict was a key part of that. Which I think is interesting, and we don't often think about it. So much so that even here in America, if any of you have ever done any work with Patrick Lencioni and his materials, he has used to be the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and now it's kind of the 5 key characteristics of a cohesive team. And in his 5 levels, the second level that he says is necessary to be a part of a functioning cohesive team is conflict, but it's productive conflict, not negative conflict. And same with the Josephson Institute. It's all about productivity and moving forward. So think about a time in just American history where so many of the things that we now embrace as a daily activity overwhelmingly came as a result of conflict. Frequently, when I'm doing this and I have people in front of me, I'll use the room for any of you who identify or express yourself as female, or for any of you that identify or express as a person of color, as I. There was part in our history where we didn't have the right to vote. Women and people of color didn't have that right to vote. And through conflict and through a push for equity and a push for justice, all through sources of conflict, product conflict, there now is the right to vote. There now is that right to vote. And so to me, that's one example. There are many that we could give in there. I'm thinking about in the community I grew up in where, there were a fight for how one neighborhood in the city had these most amazing playgrounds, and then the 2 lower income neighborhoods didn't have any playground, or the one that was there was a dirt field, so to speak, with just a couple of little 2 monkey bar things going on there. And out of that, those neighborhoods kind of rose and pulled together and raised this conflict in a helpful and a productive way to kind of show the city the inequities. But it took their voices and it took calling attention to that to make that happen. So know that conflict is actually a very meaningful and important part of this. Using third one example, this one's a little trickier, so I can't see you to see how you're going to react, but this one's a little trickier. These last 2 years, with going through everything we've gone through as a country and also as a globe with COVID, wow, you could definitely say that there's conflicting situations in there. And my heart goes out to any and all who have lost lives and loved ones because of COVID. So this is by no means saying here's the good. In that reality of those 2 years, which I do think brought in a huge amount of conflict to all of that, we're starting to see some outcomes that are positive, i.e. this conference being virtual and giving access to hundreds of more people than what frequently have had that access. With the Center for Leadership Development and Federal Executive Institute, where I'm a faculty member, pre-COVID, we had conversations that we should build some virtual classrooms. That seems like, that might be an important thing to do. And as time went on, we had a lot of other commitments that we wanted to honor. And it was a conversation that we kept going, but we never really acted on it. Then came March 2020. And the result of that, suddenly in just a couple of months, that first month, everything went on pause. And then suddenly all the different agencies that we had contracts with to do educational courses said, you know what, we've got to go virtual and we need it to go next month. Are you ready? Woo, we were not ready. And out of that, we have found an enormous amount of individuals out there who prefer and want virtual teaching versus in-person. We know now that there's a need to offer both in-person training and virtual. We probably didn't spend time thinking about all the people out there that for whatever reason can't travel to DC or travel to Baltimore, which are the 2 areas that we do a lot of our trainings in, because they are perhaps a single parent and finding someone to take care of their child for a week, or they're a main caretaker for a loved one or an aging parent. Just all kinds of examples. And still, I just did a course a couple of weeks ago and had 2 different individuals say, I wanted to take this course for years, and this was the first chance I could because of virtual. So out of that element of conflict, we turned into some kind of what is our new path going forward, which is a strength and a positive. So hopefully you get my point where I'm going on there, that there's actually benefit to conflict, and it is there's a value to it if you can turn it into the positive. That's what this is about. So some truisms of conflict: it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Even no matter how great we think we are at managing that, it's going to happen. So this isn't a course on how to prevent it. It's how to manage it when it surfaces. And also maybe how do you reduce it from escalating to being a true source of conflict. It has positive and negatives. That's what triggered me to remember to share that part on how it needs to be a part of any community. And it definitely should be handled before it escalates. That one we can say over and over, and yet I would say that is the most common way to handle it, is to pretend it's not there. It's there. And eventually it boils over and it shows up when you least expect it or when you don't want it to. So just some quick truisms on there. There are many causes of conflict, many causes. I chose kind of 3 that I think show up in our workplace within the government operations. And so you can kind of read each of those on the bullets on there. I'll just hit a couple of them. But that first one is related to differences, just our different values, our different styles, different approaches to a situation. All of those are true, and that shows up in the way we manage any decision or any item moving forward. It could be a stress in the environment. So this is, when it's a rough environment, there's frustration going on, there's continuous change. There's one of the more common ones I found is just no one wants to give an answer. It's just this cloud of, well, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. Well, so you want me to spend all this time working on something only to then have you take it out, pull away and go to a whole different route. And so that becomes a conflict situation because then you don't want to do anything. It could be in the environment competing for goals or resources. Which goal is going to be the priority? Which resource, which team project gets the resources available? That last bullet is one that I think is pretty common within government service and outside of government, but that pressure to do more with less. Working at the university, every year we would hold our breath waiting for the budget to be released because every year we knew it was going to be cut. Oh, and we want you to take on these 4 new projects. So, we're going to lose a staff person, but we're taking on 4 new projects. Easily a big example of conflict in that one. And then that role incompatibility. This is when you have friction, whether it be based on for all that work within the GS scale, our staff roles, it's our leadership, it's our lack of leadership, it's our team leaders. It's unclear who's in charge. So oftentimes when you're put in those team lead positions and you're the team lead, but you have a supervisor that really wants to be the team lead, so there's those courses, there's elements of conflict right there. And how do you manage that? And what do you do? So I don't have to spend a lot of time on this. You all could flood so much more with causes of conflict. Just wanted to kind of give you some examples of what I have experienced very frequently when doing these workshops or courses throughout government services. These are ones that tended to show up somewhat frequently on that end of it. The greatest mistake in a moment of conflict is, again, ignoring it. It's ignoring it. That is the most common response. And there are times, we're going to show a model where there are times where hitting pause, which is different than ignoring. Hitting pause is a meaningful approach to managing conflict, but ignoring it and thinking it's going to go away, not going to happen. It will surface at some point, whether it's, again, something that triggers you on something unrelated to the moment, and then you pull this back in, or it just continues to haunt you and you develop an opinion about someone who you had a moment of conflict with that you never resolved, and you just always see that person in that light on that part of it. The second part of that is about becoming aggressive. That one, I will offer this in a longer course. We would hit in this part where we realize the one key thing to remember about a moment of conflict is that 99.9 of us, emotion takes over, but we don't always recognize it. But in a moment of conflict, emotion overrides a lot of our processes, a lot of our thinking through. And this is why I say it takes being focused and it takes intentionality to step back, hit pause, catch yourself from being yourself and think, how do I want to better manage this? Because overwhelmingly, there's an emotion that shows up. I use the example of how I grew up just to give you an example of that. Immediately my defensiveness kicks in because I'm like, okay, I got to protect myself. I got to protect myself. So it's not an aggressive in that regard, but in my goal to protect myself, what messages am I sending out? And is my behavior then escalating that situation to be bigger than it needed to be or was even going to possibly be? And so it's being aware of that. But I think I could do a whole hour just on that conversation about getting to the root of a conflicting moment, by that meaning, what is the emotion that's underneath it? Maybe it's that you didn't feel prepared for something and you get called out on it and you know it, but you don't want them to know it. So then that emotion's overriding. That's again going to defensiveness. Maybe it's that you feel your opinion never gets heard, ever. So when you offer and someone cuts you off midway, then you get aggressive about it because you're tired of being cut off, which is understandable. You're tired of being cut off, but what have you done to try to get your voice heard before it gets to that point? So it's that emotion that kind of hijacks the moment and takes over and tends to lead us into then becoming aggressive or reacting in a way that, in hindsight, we would do it differently if we could. And so just to think on that. There are a lot of types of conflict, lots of types of conflict. I chose, again, 3 that are ones that I have seen show up more in the courses that I've done. And again, more related into government service, but your tax focused, which is more of the cognitive, the brain part of it, your people focused, which is more the affective, it's how you and I interact, and then the values based, which I kind of mentioned earlier on that end. Again, there are so many more. These are just kind of 3 categories that I thought fit nicely into a 1-hour presentation on this. Your task focused one on this. This is kind of a weird way to phrase this. There's some good in this as well. Again, remember, productive conflict is a value there. But this is really related to how we're going to get the work done, how we're going to accomplish what we're set out to do. And so in there, your focus is on ideals, not personalities. So that's where it can kind of diffuse and not turn into where it can become more easier to become product conflict rather than destructive, because you're really focusing on those ideals. Now, when you get people in, which we'll get to next, that's when those problems come in on. But in the general root of it, getting things done, how we're going to accomplish this, tends to be more of a cognitive decision that could lead to a productive conflict on that end. It could also go bad, but just for sake of this moment, I'm talking about that. This tends to show up more when we're dealing with a process of more creativity and productivity. So we're brainstorming, we're thinking of ideas, and then what's that best approach? The effect on the general community tends to be more neutral. Sometimes it's positive, but it tends to be more neutral because at the end of the day, here are the 4 things that have to get done. Boom. So there's not a lot of emotion in that. We know these 4 things have to get done. Now again, then who decides who's going to do what? That's where it goes into then your relationship and your affective side of things. And this is when it gets a little tricky because then you're dealing with personalities. And so your relationship focus deals with those interpersonal relationships and people, and the idea kind of gets lost. The idea kind of gets lost. We could say it shouldn't, keyword in quotes shouldn't, but it can, because then it goes into kind of this, well, why do they get to do it? Or why do I always have to be the one picking this up? Or why do you have me partner with this person? I never get to partner. Like all these kind of personalities start coming into play. That relationship comes into play. And that's where it starts to go from potentially easier going into a destructive moment of conflict rather than a productive. So you could argue in some ways, how do I keep the personality out of it and stay focused on the task? That's easier said than done. I recognize that. But that's one thing to think about, that is, in this moment, am I reacting again from emotion? And here's a question that I think I would offer for you as a takeaway that is one I offer in every course I teach, and in the moment of, I don't like it. I will admit it. But in the moment of, I have to ask myself, is the outcome I'm wanting here what's the best result? Or is the outcome I'm wanting here to win? And that's a painful reality. But oftentimes in a moment of conflict, we lose sight of what we're trying to achieve. We lose sight of what's actually best for the situation or the team or moving forward, because at the end of the day, we just want to win. And again, that goes back into thinking about our development years and what we learned and how to learn dealing with this. You know, you've heard it, you see it in TVs and movies, and even in your own life. Sometimes people are just going at it, and you say, well, what are y'all even fighting about? You know, I don't even remember at this point. because we're just so involved in I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, we lose sight of that. And so that's where these relationships can really get sticky in that end of it. And so it's really more of, this is more to just have on your radar, to be aware of it. Be aware, am I focusing more on the relationship? Am I focusing more on the task? The answer is you got to balance both of those. But where situations typically go kind of off the charts is on the relationship side of things. It can escalate rapidly because, again, you're dealing with emotions at that point. And that gets mucky in that whole process of it. So be aware that I don't think this is anything new. It's just putting a framework around it for you to think about it. The values-based, this one gets a little bit interesting to me because this really is based more on those kind of what are the values in play. So in a workplace, what is the work ethic? What's the culture of the work environment? Right now, we're in such a great focus on inclusive leadership, and many of us celebrate that. But what does that really mean? So who's making those decisions in hiring? What have we changed in our values of how we recruit, and how do we retain people? If any of you have backgrounds in HR, you'll know that kind of a current shift that's been going on for a few years is we're going away from exit interviews and doing more of what's now called stay interviews. So instead of waiting until a person decides to leave an organization to say what went well, what went wrong, what could we have done differently to keep you, they're doing it in the process of trying to retain people. That's a value shift. That's a value shift. Instead of waiting for the outcome at the end, let's talk to you. So I might go to Doug and say, Doug, tell me what's working right now. You've been here 3 years. What's working? What do you like? If you could change one thing, what would that change? If you were in charge, what would you do? This is all where conflict comes in, is what's being valued. When I was at the university, what my level, I was an assistant dean of students, we valued the students. The people above me valued the public opinion. So it's interesting, as situations happened, when we would have these student activist moments and these student protests, and I will tell you, I'm a supporter of that. Use your voice, exercise it, get out there. Universities that's what they're all about. It's that point of having thoughts kind of given to you to really ponder and think through it. You're supposed to be uncomfortable, not unsafe, but uncomfortable. That is wonderful. But upper administration worried about the media. Well, here we have another protest. And now, how's that going to affect our image? So there's a clash of values. We both valued educations, the people above me and me, and yet we had different perspectives on how that value should be managed, if you will. So it's really important to kind of think through in those moments. This one also can escalate quickly. So be aware of that end of it. It can also escalate quickly. As a supervisor, when I supervise people, I valued having your work done and being on time. And I think that's one that most of us can say is a work environment value that's important there. But that kind of can cause problems based on, I think, some people's interpretation of what does it mean to be on time. My parents taught us, being on time means being 5 minutes early. 5 minutes early is being on time. Others would get there right at the top of the hour. And people might interpret that, well, you're on time, but really you're not. That's a values clash. What does that really mean? Or here's a bigger one in our work environment, working extra hours, working late, right? You might be one that says, I really want to value an 8-hour workday, and that's my commitment, and I'm going to stick to it. And then you're supervised by someone who will email you at 8 and 9 o'clock at night. So then you have this values clash, like, you know what? Do I have permission not to check my work email at 8 o'clock at night because my supervisor is? I'm valuing my time away. This person's sending a message that they're valuing that you're on the clock 24/7. What value is going to win? Well, it's my supervisor. So I'm probably going to force myself to log in and do that. Those are those examples of what happens in those values clash. So again, stuff that you probably already know, just want to give you some framework on that. When I said earlier at the start of this, what are some of the contributing factors, and gave you some examples, here's some more. And again, all of these are just, the things that go on that can contribute on those. These are just a few on there, but, it really is situational. It's really environmental. It's really who are the players involved. It's really what's kind of the pressure going on individuals. And I meant quite seriously, it could be the time of day. What's going on there? How rigid is this? What's pushing this? These are all contributing factors. And it's important as you're approaching a situation on that to kind of think through What are the contributing factors? And here's another takeaway. What part did I contribute to this? Because oftentimes we think it's someone else's fault and we forget that we probably had a role in there as well. So what part of this did I contribute to? That's a hard one because, again, I think most of us want it to be someone else's, that they did it and we're just reaction to it. But quite honestly, what role did I play in this? How did I show up? How did I address it? How did I speak to it? What did I contribute? It's an important question to ask yourself. What did I contribute into this? All right. So watching my time and seeing on there. So some things to think about when conflict occurs, right? Behaviors escalate. And this is kind of right in the moment of. You kind of see these kind of tendencies that, people become adversarials to one another, that, who's on what side. You might go into some personal attacks. Those of you that have a strong wit are brutal, can be very brutal in a moment of conflict because we have sharp tongues. And I say we because I have that. And I can just like slice someone down and then it makes it worse. It's not that I meant to, but that's my reaction on there. We might withdraw and avoid. That's probably another very, very common one is I'd rather just, let's just hit pause and others will fix it or it will go away. And so all these kind of behaviors that escalate in a moment of conflict. As time passes, the facts start to fade. That's a tricky one. So that's why, for me, I'm a big believer when conflict is occurring, try to lean into it when you can. Don't lean into it 4 months later because suddenly the facts are fuzzy. And you're like, I know you said this, and I know you said this, and you come across so strong on your conviction there. And if someone had videotaped it, you might be surprised to find out you said none of that, right? Or none of that was said. But in your mind, you rewrote history. This is what you did, and this is what caused this. So be aware that our goal here is address it in the moment rather than postponing it till later, because you're going to have a clearer view of the situation. That doesn't mean you have to do it right in the moment, but don't let it go months. Is where we're going on that end of it, because we do rewrite history. And emotions can build. Emotions happen in the moment of as well, but they can also build. So again, if you've got someone that you saw maybe said something short to you one day and they never apologized, you have a tendency to now do what we call confirmation bias and seek all the ways they're confirming your negative opinion about them. Right? We might be missing all the good they've done because we're like, that person's rude. And here's all the examples I now have pulled together of how they're being rude. Right? And as time passes, you find you have a whole list of options there because they continuously do it. Again, you might have missed all the things they didn't do rude, but you're really focusing on building that story of what they did rude. So just be aware of that when the conflict occurs. At the end of the day, you all, here's the one reality people don't often like, and sometimes I get pushback, and I am fine with the pushback. At the end of the day, how we handle conflict is a choice. Always is a choice. So there's the stimulus. Something happens, whatever the situation, whatever is causing the reaction, whatever is kicking in that has your back getting stiff, something happens. In that middle is I have a choice on how I'm going to respond, and then I respond. So really, today's conversation is the part in the middle. It's my choice. What do I do with this? What do I do with this? How do I want to handle it? How do I want to respond on that end of it? But at the end of the day, this is usually where people get frustrated. Conflict is how we handle conflict is always a choice, always a choice. And more times than not, we have a choice in how we respond to it. Sometimes we feel like we really can't, and we're being forced to go into this way. You still have a choice in how you respond in the moment, or how you respond in the follow-up to that. So let me pause for a moment and ask, because Doug's watching the room. Doug, anything popping up I should be aware of? Any curiosities or questions on there? I know I'm throwing that on you all of a sudden, so apologies, but it just
no. Not a problem at all. There's some good chat in discussing the attendee chat just about, commenting on some of the areas you're seeing about how different bosses are handling conflict resolution or running from it. There's some questions which we can get to, or if you want to touch on is, just managing that emotion, so not to go down that rabbit hole. How to avoid, looking at the facts versus the emotions. Also, any type of mental hacks on how not to get triggered in a situation of conflict. That seems to be kind of
Yeah.
the feedback. You're touching some of it, but I know you have more to go.
Yeah, no, that's actually what you highlighted there is great because this is sort of our shift now to go into the so
Yeah.
what now what part. So actually several of the things you addressed, I hope I'll be able to cover in the uh, few minutes, 15 plus minutes we have left, because that fits nicely into what you just highlighted. So going into that, that's a great segue. I did not know those were questions that Doug was going to highlight, but they're perfect into setting up where we're going to go for these next few slides. So in this whole part about conflict being a choice, you can look again at constructive responses. Oftentimes, that means I'm shifting now more into the task part of things and kind of leaving emotion out of it, or destructive responses, which goes into that person or values focused. And so what does that mean? So here's a tool for you to think through or kind of look on this part of it. And this is looking at, kind of your two axes there. On the left, you've got passive and active. So these are responses that we would have or could have in a moment of conflict. There are others, but just using this example, so on the left, you'll see the passive and active, and on the top, you see constructive and destructive. So a constructive active behavior. So this is, the question about what are some techniques or some strategies in managing that. Perfect segue into this. A constructive versus, let me go down to the negative or more negative first and do the destructive. And the destructive and the passive. So this means that I'm doing passive behavior, and it can lead to being destructive, avoiding, just pretending it's not there, yielding, always being that, yes, whatever you say, I'm fine with, that being agreeable. There's a difference in being agreeable and just being very much of a yielder. And a yielder typically agrees and then walks away frustrated. And again, this is where we talk about how things build. Because I'm like, yes, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. That's fine. And then, years later, like, I never liked that decision. Well, you let it happen. Yes, but I never liked it. So that's that passive, and that tends to be destructive because it kind of really infuses into the experience of how a person feels in that environment. Hiding emotions. Now, this is tricky. I am not at all suggesting that you need to show all those emotions, but, for any of you that have been in a relationship and that person's response is fine, and then silence. You're like, okay, tell me what's really going on. No, I'm fine. And then inside, they're not fine, right? They're not fine, but they're not going to give you anything. And then you create stories, and then you respond based on the stories you did, and then it just kind of implodes again. Is there the other one that I think is a destructive and passive is the self-criticizing. That little voice in our head could be and should be our greatest friend, but it is often one of the more venomous voices we have, because we can talk ourselves into believing we're the worst things ever, right? So, well, it's clearly my fault. I always screw up. I wasn't prepared. I always overreact. There's some truth in that, recognizing what did you contribute, as I said earlier, but be aware of when it's truth that falls into now just being overly self-critical. You can't always be your fault, right, in that line of that. But it's, again, that's a passive destructive, because instead of recognizing that the other person also has things to correct, you just take it all on you. It's all on you. Staying in that destructive, but staying now into the active. So these are behaviors that are destructive, but you're acting on them. They're in the moment. So again, winning at all costs. Think about that situation when I asked you, thinking about a time of conflict that you either have been in or currently are in. How attached are you to winning? Even if winning isn't the right response or the right answer, how attached are you at winning? Displaying that anger, never good, especially in a work environment, never a good option. You don't want to be known as that person that blows up that way. Demeaning others, it's something that we do quite comfortably, I'm sad to say, but that ability to make others feel small so that we feel larger. Again, tying this into emotion, that's what that's about. But let me make you small so that I appear bigger. Or retaliating. That's a scary one to me, that retaliation. Okay, you did this, watch what I can do. Right? We get really good at that. I say we in the general, I don't know you, but just generically, we're pretty good at finding ways to retaliate, I think. Now going over into the constructive, behaviors that are constructive, that are passive. And people sometimes struggle with thinking a passive behavior can be a positive. In this case, it can. It's constructive. Reflective thinking. So you tie reflective thinking with delay responding. This might be you're in a situation and you're like, you know what, Doug, this is in front of us, and I don't have all my facts together to really get the best outcome in this. Can we agree to take a 30-minute pause and let me go get my thoughts together, or let me go do some research, or you know what, Doug, I feel this is starting to get a little bit tense. I really need to take this call first. And then can I come back? I will come back to you. If you don't see me within the hour, come find me. I may or may not, I'm not saying lying, but I may or may not be going into that call. I just need to get a step away. So that ability to delay the responding, great, let's talk about it. I'm kind of busy until 4 o'clock. Can we touch then at 4? Delaying that response gives you time to do a couple of things. 1, calm down. And 2, reflective thinking. Again, this is where I talk about it's intentional. How we show up, it's intentional. I have to choose. So what do I know for sure? Not what is the story I think I'm working from or what am I creating, but what do I know for sure? What are the facts? So that reflective thinking, what did I contribute to this? How could this have been misinterpreted? How could my reactions, what are the possible ways my reaction will cause on these? So many things you could do in that reflective thinking. And then that adapting. You know what? I was really more committed to winning than what's right. So I'm going to adapt. I'm going to approach Doug differently and say, okay, Doug, now that we've had this, let me talk through this differently. So those are all passive behaviors that are actually constructive. Constructive, active, perspective taking. That's a big one. If any of you are Brene Brown fans, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. I make no commission off of her, but if you want to Google her, she has incredible videos out there and great books. Perspective taking, that means letting me hit pause and hearing your thoughts. What are you experiencing? What's the story you created? Right? So I'm going to hear what you are offering and incorporate that into my thinking. Part of that is I'm trying to remind myself I may not be right, but I'm so committed to being right. Perspective taking me allows me to realize I may have a portion of this that's right, but there's a portion of this that isn't. Creating solutions, kind of these other ones you kind of get on there, expressing your emotions. Again, emotion, it doesn't mean you have to wear it out on your sleeve, but that expressing emotion, it's actually very acceptable to say, I am feeling very frustrated right now. That's what I am feeling. It's not, it's not it's not you, but I'm just feeling frustrated. So could we hit pause and let me kind of calm myself down? Take ownership of what you're feeling. That's appropriate. Or I'm feeling really shocked by this. This came out of nowhere. It's not adding fuel to the fire. It's simply saying, I am experiencing something in there. And I often would say on that one, I'm just kind of surprised by this, but I'm committed to working through this. So let me hear your thoughts on this first, and then I'll give you my thoughts. And reaching out kind of says it right there. Initiate, reach out to others. Productive conflict happens when there's trust in the team. So if you're on a team and you don't feel that you can actually get under a path of productive conflict there, think about how much trust is there in the team. Again, if you ever looked at Patrick Lencioni, not selling his product either, just it's a great motto. That first level is trust. How much trust is there on the team? Do I trust that you're going to do your job? Do you trust that I'm going to do my job? Is there trust that if I give you feedback, it's not to hurt you, but to help? Like all those things are a part of building that trust within a team. And productive conflicts focuses on concepts and ideals that lead to the best possible solution. So again, not every moment of conflict is a negative. What can we pull out of this? What can we learn out of this? I think about a colleague I have that we had never worked together, and we have very different delivery styles. And this individual, I tend to be one that follows lists and systems, and the time says this and all of that. This individual is very free willy. Shows up. We're supposed to log in at 8, and this individual logged in at 8:03. And then we don't make schedule changes and says, you know what, I kind of feel I'm not feeling this. Let's change this on the moment of. Well, I'm a planner. Right. And so it's like neither necessarily wrong or right, but that's going to do it. And we had a big moment of conflict. We actually put all this in place, and we actually do very well together now in terms of how we can function on it. Now, there's a lot more to that story. I don't have time to give it all. But it took me reaching out. The last slide, I had to reach out to say, here's the deal. I got assigned to work with you again, and I am not excited about it. But I'd like to work towards how can we get to a point where we both are excited to work with one another. First, is that possible? And then what would it take? And we had the most amazing 2-hour conversation that really I wouldn't pretend that we're friends still yet, on that end, but I don't get a gut reaction when I find out I've been assigned to work with this individual again. We actually do very well, even with our styles on those end. And we both have to take breaths still, but it's productive on that end. Just quickly, again, watching our time, these are some of the benefits of productive conflict. Hopefully you can read those if you're on a small screen like me. I know it's a little bit tight there, but you can get a lot of that. You really, in productive conflict, you can hear the various voices in the room is a big one of that, which can really stimulate more creativity and more productive problem solving. When you incorporate all those different voices in the room, it really helps on that end of it. It really makes space for people to listen and actually be heard. And I would say active listening, not listening. Listening is, we're taught listening. My job as the listener is I have to be ready to respond. Active listening, my job is I'm here to understand. There's a big difference. So listening is to respond. Active listening is to understand. Go into a moment of conflict, start to really think about what would it take for me to active listening and understand rather than making sure I'm heard on that end. So there's a variety of benefits. Those are some of the ones that kind of stand out for me on that end. Here's just a chart kind of showing that really we know that we need a fair amount of conflict, but we don't want to overdo it. So if there's no conflict and everyone gets, I love this quote, that part, if everybody agrees, then who's not really needed here? That's kind of a weird, you have to think through, but it's basically saying there's value to having these different thoughts. What I think we've lost in society is civil discourse, the ability to have differing thoughts and be able to walk through and talk through. And then still go out. I can think about my college days in my fraternity. We would have these moments of conflict, and then when we were through with the meeting, and say, anybody want to go down and grab a beer? And the same people that were arguing could go and sit and have a beer. They kind of work through, or a soda, whichever is your choice. But they could kind of work through that. So this is just giving you a visual that you need a dose of conflict, but know the balance when it's too much or not enough on that end. A hot mic somewhere, it looks like. I'm going to keep going. So this is one another suggestion on, and I'm going to do this very quickly, and I apologize, but you can Google this online. Again, not commission-based. I'm not selling these. These are just models I use. And if we're in person doing a longer course, I would have each of you take this assessment. I love this model because this is giving you 5 approaches to dealing with conflict. And so you'll see on that on the screen the left and right side of things. On that left side, you've got kind of the unassertive to assertive on your left axis, and then on the bottom axis, it's uncooperative to cooperative. And what Thomas Tillman model is telling you is that these are 5 approaches to dealing with conflict, and based on the situation and the people involved, any one of these might be the best option. All right. So if you take this assessment, your score will show what your tendency is. You have all 5 of these abilities in you, but it's going to show you what your tendency is, the one that is your go-to or your default without you thinking about it. So avoiding. The avoiding part of that, the goal is to delay. So my approach on that is I'm going to delay. I'm going to not deal with it right in the moment of. And again, it's not that you don't come back to it. But it could be when there's something so important going on or things are so tense that the worst thing you could do is to deal with it right then and there. And so you hit the word avoid and say, let's hit pause. Another word for avoiding is hitting pause. Or when you just know it's going to be a dead end in that moment of, you're like, let's let them simmer down on that part of it. And so there's actually a strength to avoiding. That means you're able to, the positive of that is I'm able to see what's coming at me, and I'm able to kind of figure out how best to manage it. Let's delay this conversation. Let's hit pause. Let's get others involved. Let's de-escalate the moment of to find a better outcome of it. Clearly, if you overuse it, and avoiding is just, I'm never going to be a part of this, I'm stepping away entirely, that's going to go into a negative on that end. But the positive to that, is it's dodging the bullet in the moment of. Going over to accommodating, frequently you hear that as a positive. The goal in accommodating is to yield. I'm going to accommodate you. I'm going to go where you want to go on that, and that's actually very great. Again, on depending on what that outcome is, this might be when you realize that you were wrong in the situation. And so you're going to kind of try to change that and say, I'm going to accommodate where you are. Or maybe it's an outcome that there are two possible outcomes and both are right. And so you're like, you know what? I feel like I'm really trying to win rather than what's best. Let's give yours a try. But don't hold them if it doesn't go. You can't throw it back and say, well, see, we tried your way and it didn't work. But it's like literally either one of these approaches could work. So I did the last one, you go this one. I'm kind of saying it lightly, but or when the issue is more important to the other person than to you. Like, is this really the one I'm going to get on my sword on? No. It's not that crucial. I don't have to go in my home with my husband. He's got a great ability to decorate our house and all that. And he has ideas of what color he wants everything. And I don't really care because I know I trust him and everything he does looks like it's out of a show home. So I'm very accommodating. You do that, but I handle the technology in the house. So that's kind of how we do that. So for me, accommodating, pick and choose. I came home from a trip one time and he had painted the living room black. Wow. But you got to see it. It actually was pretty brilliant in the way it did. Compromising, because I got 4 minutes left. Compromising, the goal is to find that middle ground. And there's value to compromise. Again, you can see I don't need to give you all the values. You can see the good in there. Compromising is you win, I win. The downside is if you're always compromising, people will not know what you stand for. If you're always compromising, people don't know what you stand for, what is most important to you, what is really driving you on that end. So be aware of it. But there is value in that compromise. You win, I win. But we don't all get the big picture, but enough. Competing, the goal is to win. The goal is to win. That can, people tend to think that is a negative on that end, but there's actually some value to that part about competing. When you absolutely know, let's say as government employees, that decision is going to breach ethics, you bet I'm going to stand up and say, here's the answer. Here's what we're going to do. And it's not about winning. It's about what is right. So there are times when competing is this is going to be the right answer because I'm not going to have a lawsuit, or I'm not going to have this agency get in trouble, or I'm not going to put my career in jeopardy because of an ethics breach. That's where competing comes into play. Collaborate, that finding win-win, kind of similar compromising on that end, but the difference here, the compromiser tends to give more into the middle ground. The collaborating is more of, again, what can we both walk away feeling like we had a victory with on there. So the compromising gives up a little bit more. I kind of missaid that, whereas the collaborating is more of that win-win. And it's an integrative solution. Both parties have something in play there. And it's a good one. The downside is, again, sometimes we can over-collaborate. So again, where are we not making a stance? Where are we not doing what is best for the agency or the organization? That collaboration is leading to kind of a dysfunction in the long run. So it's balancing out that part. But in used correctly, all 5 of these used moderately and wisely are very effective. Very effective. I just don't think that we often tell people actually avoiding is a strong way to handle conflict on there. So one quick poll in the 2 minutes we have left.
All right. So here's the poll. We're actually going to do 2 polls. So this is what everyone get their CPU. So here we go. Here's our first one. How to embrace conflict for a sorry, my screen has gone blank on me. Go back, give me 1 second here, friends. All right, I'll find the question here. There we go.
I'll say, of the TKI models, of the 5 that I mentioned, which one do you feel is most the one you probably is your default? Competing, avoiding, compromising, collaborating, or accommodating?
I have to take a few seconds to answer that, and we'll bring you the results. And while we're doing that, I have to rush through a little bit, but I really want to appreciate Ruben's time and content today. This is a phenomenal amount of information, super helpful. Ruben, the good news is you hit a lot of the questions just going through your slides.
Good.
But obviously this could be a 6-hour session, so we appreciate the condensed version of it today. But really powerful, lots of positive comments. When we look here, here's some of the results. Ruben, anything that jumps out at you here?
Nope. I would say the pattern tends to be compromisers. We're a world full of compromisers on that end of it. So. And typically people don't see competing because they still think that has a negative connotation on that end. And it doesn't show up as often on there. So nothing really surprising.
All right, I'm going to jump to one more poll question here, friends.
Yeah. I'm moving the slide. I apologize. There we go.
Oh, that's okay. So here's our next poll question. Can you see effective problem solving stemming from conflict? Yes, no, in some cases. Once again, here's something that can be hard for us. But I think, through today's session, we learned a lot. So hopefully we'll see some answers here, but we'll give you a few more seconds to answer this. And don't worry, folks, the closing keynote's not till 3 p.m., so you do have a little time.
I promise I won't take up all your time.
We just want to get everyone their CP. So, all right, let's see what the audience says here. All right, so 48% yes, 0 no's, which is good to hear, and then in some cases 51%. And once again, Ruben, anything here that shocks you or?
No, I think that's spot on, because I would always agree that it's situational based. It really depends on what's in play. So in some cases, yes. I'm glad to see that there's not the no on there, because then the other part of that is more of an assertive, we can make this work and this is going to be right. But at the end of the day, this won't fix and solve everything on there. Right. So I think there's room for that in some cases, yes. In the cases where it doesn't work, it doesn't mean defeat. It just means that it wasn't going to be effective for each to kind of figure that out. But it doesn't mean all the damage is done. As odd as this sound, not having it implode, but still not coming to an agreement is more positive than having it implode. Yeah. So sometimes we have to think about a small win might be we didn't make things worse. And as a result of that, we have a pathway to maybe making it better. It just didn't happen in this moment. But anytime you're not chipping away at it more is a positive in my book.
Yeah.
So
that makes perfect sense. Great.
Doug, if I may, let me do one. I'll take one more minute, and then I promise we'll get on there, because I wanted to. You can see the slides, but I wanted to mention one of the other things about how do we catch ourselves. Another thing you can look at Google is called the conflict dynamics profile. Conflict dynamics profile. And again, none of these am I advocating. I'm just trying to give you resources. It's an assessment that you can take, and it highlights kind of how we individually approach conflict. But a concept of theirs that I love is be aware of your hot buttons. Be aware of your but what are the things that can trigger you to go into a reaction? And so here's what they have. And I just wanted to call attention to this because I know you'll have access to the slides. This is worth kind of doing your own inventory. What are the things about this that cause my hot button to react? Meaning that if a person I'm working with continuously uses one of these, it's a hot button, and I'm going to show up on that end. So I am not a fan of abrasive people. I just think anybody that's trying to lead individuals who comes across abrasive and nasty and mean is a hot button. And I know that I either avoid it or, again, youngest child, I'm going to find a way to battle that. I'm going to take it on, if you will. And so that is a hot button for me. So be rude and mean, and I'm going to try to I fight for the underdog. And so that abrasiveness is a hot button, and it tends to cause me to want to react in some way. So I just offer these because that was another one of the questions is what are some triggers we can catch? Start to be aware of what are your hot buttons. For a lot of us, micromanaging, being micromanaged, hate that, right? It's a big problem on there. So be aware of that. I just wanted to offer that end of it. So, and with that, I am going to go ahead and wrap so you can get some break before you get into that keynote. But I do want to thank you for spending this time with me. I hope that it was helpful. Hope you have some takeaways, and encourage you to keep doing great work going forward on all that you do. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Ruben, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Super informative. Great questions we have from our audience engaged. I'd like to thank our Partner Alliance for supporting NextGen to bring us today's programming. We have an afternoon keynote coming up, so we hope you can join us on that. That's at 3 p.m. And lastly, if you head back to the console now, so 2, 2, 3, 4, we have confront and eliminate unconscious bias in the workplace. And then we have, what are you doing wrong and what must you start doing today in terms of networking? So for the folks that have made it this far, thank you so much. We appreciate all the hard work you do every day. I know this session was useful for you. We look forward to seeing you at the closing keynote. And once again, Ruben, thank you for your time and awesome content today. And that concludes our session. We'll see you in the conference hall.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate your help today.
Thanks, Ruben.
Hey, I didn't check. How many do we have? Did you see a number roughly?